I wanted to, guys, break down some of the bigger moments from Vin Scully's career in terms of those calls, the calls that we talked about him nailing, just stepping up and really delivering a great call. It starts with, the first one I want to bring up is Don Larson, perfect game, 1956 World Series. A perfect game in the World Series.
It's happened one time.
We talked about moments that Vin Scully's made for. That's it right there. And I think something that stood out to me about that particular call is the fact that it came against the Dodgers, a team that he's been covering, a team that he probably has the closest connection to, obviously, and his heart is probably obviously willing for the Dodgers. But the fact that he's able to deliver that call in support of the Yankees against the Dodgers in such a big moment, I think points to something Red Barber really put on Vin Scully from the moment that he started in his career was about being unbiased, was about really being objective and calling the game how he sees it. That's something that Vin Scully did excellently throughout his career. Despite 67 years with the Dodgers, he was still able to rise to the occasion in those big moments, be objective, and really just be the true broadcaster.
There was a moment after the team moved to Los Angeles, I'm sure we read up on this story, where they asked him when they moved, could you be more pro-Dodgers as we try to generate a fan base on the West Coast? He said no. He said he was going to stay being objective no matter what, and that's what he did. You talk about that moment, his team that he's been calling, that he loves, they got perfect games in the World Series, but you couldn't tell that it was, the opposition. He made every call. It didn't matter the team.
I think back to that, his call, I know we're going to mention it when Hank Aaron breaks the home run record, and it really felt like he was more of a fan of baseball than anything else, and I think that was important. And you think back to all those calls that, as much as he loved his Dodgers, he was always unbiased, and he always served the baseball fan more than maybe he served the Dodger fan, but he also served the Dodger fan a lot, and I think he just was able to do everything the right way, which I think is what makes Vin Scully Vin Scully.
Mike, you got the Brooklyn Dodgers hat on. I had to shout that. I just noticed as I was watching you speak.
So I threw it on. I had not had it on throughout the show. I wanted to wear it, but then I was like, you know what? I'll wear the polo. I'll try to look official, but then throw it on for the final segment. We're talking Vin Scully.
You gotta throw it on.
And as much as he was part of the Los Angeles Dodgers, the same franchise when it was in Brooklyn, that's where he made his start. So I guess that's where Vin Scully was first brought into all the Dodgers, fans' lives, and I think that's what made him, really set his mark. And then he transitioned then to LA. So I do have the Dodgers hat. That is correct.
Love the Dodgers hat. From one perfect game to another, of course, Sandy Koufax. We brought that up before. Something, I think I talked about it a little bit earlier in the show, Ryan, is that he just had a sense of when the moment was big. And obviously with a perfect game, that's a huge call. You have to nail it. But just the fact to take the maturity and step back and say the time, the date, the amount of fans in attendance, all of those little details, he does those so perfectly, does those so well, that just makes the moment extra special. It makes you feel like you're there.
And I do want to add this because I was reading up about that, or I was watching an interview on him, and he said that he originally didn't do that for dramatic effect, that he wanted the timestamp for Sandy Koufax, for his family, for his friends, so they knew when it happened, and they could hear it on broadcast. And that's why he announces the time, but he said after it happened, people told him that it added so much to the broadcast, the fact that they could feel the time. It was there.
9:46.
Yes, 9:46 p.m., and then he does 47. Yeah, so that was really, it helps you feel like you're there. But it's crazy how he was thinking about Sandy Koufax in the moment. He was thinking about his family, that he wanted to give the time for them. And it just so happened that the way he came across giving the time, that he was doing it so great that it became part of the moment more so than anything for for Sandy Koufax's family.
Yeah, if there's a world out there where you're listening to this and you haven't seen just that whole ninth inning, I believe MLB Network has it archived and on.
It's on YouTube.
Channel.
It's like a 7-minute 40.
It's about it's just like that whole inning, and there was no.
Yes, that's what I was going to bring up. What's great about it? There's no video.
Yep.
It's just pictures, but you've never felt more in the moment. You've never felt like you had a more visual look of what's going on, despite just the pictures, because of just the masterclass that he painted.
Because every single detail is just, illustrated to perfection. I mean, he talks about wiping the sweat from his brow.
With the index finger, I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, of course, Mike. You know this whole thing. I mean, he wipes it on his pants. He adjusts his belt. Every little detail.
I like in that one where he says, that's the first time Sandy threw more than he pitched. And like the way he says it, it's like, wow,
that's
I'm
something
there.
a color guy says.
Yeah.
And that's something that Vin says in that moment, because obviously he's by himself in that booth. truth. And that's like an in-depth analysis of baseball that he's able to provide in such a big moment like that.
And I think the biggest thing that he was able to bring to that moment is that although there is no video of it, there is no camera, you don't need it, because that's how well he paints the picture. And, we talk about it all the time. I'm not going to try to say it like Vin, but the 2-2 to Harvey Keene, that's amazing. The way he...
You could try and... No, you don't have to. It's a little...
a lot of pressure. We've already heard some great impressions.
No, I did a lot behind the glass before
we all
in the breaks.
We all did. I've heard 2-2 to Harvey Keene like going in my head like all day long.
Well, I always tell the story. I remember I wasn't even old enough to know who Vin Scully was, but it would just be walking around the house and that would be randomly said at all times. And I didn't even know who Harvey Keene was at that time.
I still don't know.
I didn't even know what the call was attached to. Just the fact that he said the way he said it, just the elegance. It felt like he was singing every time he spoke, and I think just added to how great he made that moment and every moment he called.
Hank Aaron home run record 1974, another huge call, another huge moment. It was just it just happened to be that the Braves were playing the Dodgers, and of course Vin Scully was there.
And you don't usually hear Vin's call because you think of the one where it's like there's a new home run king.
Yes,
and
which
that's
is a great
the one
call too.
I knew. And when I listened to Vin's call, I thought it was different, but it was just as special.
Yeah, there's a couple moments like that. There's a couple moments like that where there's
and
other
the Kirk
call.
Gibson.
The Kirk Gibson is the same exact one. That's what I was alluding to. It's another great call, that one by Jack Buck. But you go back to Vin and you think, okay, that's also an awesome call. That also is just a perfect call. They kind of like a lot of editing goes into that. From what I've heard of that call, it's Hank Aaron hits the home run. Vin Scully said it's gone. And then you hear Vin Scully say the iconic line that a black man is getting a standing ovation in the Deep South. And just a perfect line, first of all, with, more than just baseball and how big that moment
transcending baseball is something that he no doubtably did throughout his career. That moment, so much more important for the history of America. I know, American baseball tied to the hip, especially in that 19th century with Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. All of that, for that moment, for him to... you think about the home run, your passing records, everything like that, but in the back of your mind to realize that this isn't just a baseball moment. This is an American history moment. He was able to do that. He's able to deliver the line after he leaves the press box. We brought it up earlier, Sam. Leaves the press box in the middle of the call, yet it's the best part of the call. And it's, it's nothing to do without him talking. It's just the essence of the crowd was truly captured in that moment.
I think before I just want to stay on this call, I think another great thing about it is he knows... He's a one-man booth, but he knows the crowd is, his companion. He knows that. And I think about myself, broadcasting baseball games in the spring. I always felt that, I always need to be speaking. There always need to be some sort of voice on the call. But, what I learned from watching these calls of Vin Scully, he knew that the crowd noise, he knew that the crowd itself was just as important as anything he might be able to say in the moment. And in that Hank Aaron home run, he lets the crowd just play out for a minute or so, and I think that just elevates the call. And then when he does come back, he's collected, and he gives it that great speech that he gives about Hank Aaron breaking the home run.
And yeah, Mike, I was about to say that as a young broadcaster, you almost feel the pressure to speak. You feel the pressure to say, okay, this is my job. I have to say something. I have to come up with the, perfect encapsulation of what just happened. But you don't have to do that sometimes. Sometimes you can be in that moment and just let that crowd noise really carry you through. And then obviously he's still able to deliver such a, an impactful line. I think Vin, you always think of Vin Scully as the baseball announcer, and rightfully so, with all the years and all the love of baseball that he has. But he's got another big moment outside of the game of baseball, in football, the NFC Championship 1981. The catch is what it's called, the San Francisco 49ers. Just an unbelievable catch by Dwight Clark, Joe Montana, rolling right in the NFC Championship game. Vin Scully on the call there. A really cool quote that I pulled that I love from that call is Dwight Clark is 6'4". He stands about 10 feet tall in this crowd's estimation. He says that just with so much ease, like it. I think, it was said earlier as well, is that it would take you months to write down everything that Vin Scully said, like you were writing a book, and just put that all together. Vin was able to do that in the moment. He did that once again with just another iconic call.
And I brought this up before, I think, during one of the interviews. It's you think about everything he did in the game of baseball, then it's like, oh, yeah, he also got the catch.
Yep.
Like unbelievable
Casually
career.
yeah.
And I believe the way it went, he was in contention for the Super Bowl call that year. He didn't get it. This was his consolation prize. I don't know if you put the NFC Championship game as a consolation. And this was the last game he called. He stopped calling football after that. So he went out in style. I think he said
the mic there.
If there's a way to quit calling football, it's with that call and that catch.
Yeah, and I think that was actually his last football game he ever called. I believe so. That's the case, that he left his mark on the NFL with that call and, with that broadcast of that game. And it really didn't need football. I mean, I think his mark was in baseball, but the fact that he was, able to go into all these different sports. We talked about it for him. He was calling basketball games. He was calling football games before he even got to baseball. He's a tremendous broadcaster. He didn't always need to do baseball. He could do any sport, really, but baseball is where he left his mark, really.
Baseball is where he left his mark. Two more, quick calls, and I'll group them together as Bill Buckner, his big-time era, Game 6 of the 1986 World Series. The Mets, obviously huge at-bat from Mookie Wilson. They win Game 7. A really difficult, and I would say a difficult call because of how crazy that moment was. It was a wild pitch. It was an error. It was, all of that played together into such a game with such high stakes. Vin handled it with ease, obviously was able to nail that call as well, and just kind of feeling the shock like the rest of the audience, everyone else listening, kind of just reflecting that shock in his voice.
But there's also, there's a moment where broadcasters, like if something unexpected happens, you go too high, your octanes, you go too high with your voice. He didn't. He was able to keep that, and I know there was definitely a shock in his voice, but it was still calming in the sense where he was ready for the air. You talk about knowing when the moment's coming, and you never expect the ball to go through Bill Buckner's legs, but it's not that he expected it, it's that he was ready. His voice was set up, the play was set up perfectly to where anything could have happened, and he still would have nailed the call, and obviously he nailed the call.
And I think back to, when my uncle was at, Fordham University at WFV, he used to talk about Marty Glickman and how he used to tell him, be exciting, not excited when you make the big call. And I think that demonstrates how Vin Scully was. He didn't sound like he was over the moon when these things happened, but he was exciting to see him describe the play. I think that was what made him so special, that he was always a storyteller, and he always made it exciting for the fan, and he never, got too carried away, but he always described it perfectly. That's what made him amazing.
In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. I mean,
he waited to deliver that line.
He waited to deliver that line. Kirk Gibson pinch hit homer, Game 1, 1988 World Series. Most people say his greatest call. I would say probably two. I mean, watching it over, obviously there's so many, it's hard to pick. But just an unbelievable
so many
call.
We don't even know. Maybe
we don't even know.
Archives of Brooklyn, of Los Angeles,
between the cracks
before the TV, and there's so many. The only reason we have the perfect game by obviously Sandy Koufax is probably someone was taping it because they saw that he's throwing a perfect game. We have to tape this game. You think about Shot Heard Around the World. It was a student that taped that final inning of the game, and if that student wasn't taping it, we would not have that call. So you think about how that was back in the day where there weren't recorded archives of games. So it's like there are legendary calls that probably people remember, but we don't really have to pull up.
Yeah, and Ryan and Mike, just one more quick thing, obviously, about Vin Scully and about FUV. And I know, we've done a lot to honor him throughout this show. The connection to him, the connection to our alumni, it's been an incredible show, and just the opportunity to speak on Vin and his unbelievable career, his unbelievable life has been such a blessing.
It's been such an honor, and it's undoubtable that we wouldn't be here without Vin. And It doesn't matter that we never met him or anything like that. His touch on our lives, and I know specifically, like, the impact that he's had on me and not knowing him at all, it's really remarkable. And just hearing about the person he was on top of that, how proud he makes me to go to Fordham University, just knowing that he was in this position, it's almost hard to put into words, Sam and Mike, but such a special person, such a special human being, and so blessed that, we were able to share, I guess, this type of connection with him.
Yeah, and I think to be able to walk the halls, I guess for me personally, being for Fordham Prep, where obviously Vin Scully was, you always knew the name Vin Scully, even when you were just a high school student there at Fordham Prep. I have Fordham Prep buddies that would, texted me when, Vin Scully passed away earlier this week. He was that kind of legend. You didn't even go to Fordham. You didn't even go to WFV. You didn't need to be a Dodger fan. It was Vin Scully. He transcended all that, and that makes him really a legend of all of our lives. And, I'm honored to be able to walk the same halls he did at Fordham and be a part of WFUV. So, I'm really proud, like Ryan says, to be a part of this radio station. And it's all because of Vin Scully.